Let me show you how I set up my menu and my settings for my Nikon D600, which I've used for a number of years in professional work. It's very simple, but I'll run you through each menu item so you can hear my thoughts and decide what you want to do. Obviously, first of all, the playback menu, delete, well, whatever. I wouldn't delete all through there, to be honest. I'd rather use formats. Playback folder. I don't change my folders, but I appreciate if you want to customize them. Hide image. Well, I don't usually touch that. Playback display options. Again, I haven't changed that. I just use a basic overview. If I want anything else, I can flip through in the playback. Copy images, never touch. Image review, I do have it on. After delete, just have it on show next. That's what I prefer, especially if I'm running through a set of images. After deleting one, I want to see what comes next. Rotate tool off. I hate when it changes it because then I can't see the image much bigger without hitting magnify. Slideshow, not interested. That's blacked out, not interested. Storage folder, I tend to not really change that too much, so that's not a big deal. File naming, I've just put my initials in there. Role played by card in the second slot. I've gone with backup just in case the first card fails. I've got the information on the second card. Obviously after that I would try file recovery software. Image quality, I always shoot in RAW. So with the Nikon D600, that's NEF RAW. I almost never need JPEGs as well, but if I did, I would go for JPEG fine with the NEF RAW. Image area, I got a crop for if I use a DX lens. Never really do, so it's not a big deal. JPEG compression, optimal quality. Not really shooting JPEGs anyway. NEF RAW recording. I use 14-bit, the highest bit depth, why not? And compressed, just standard. I've messed around with them both, but for my work, it doesn't really make a difference, to be honest. White balance, always on auto. Standard picture control, I don't want the CPU to do anything to my images. Manage picture control, not interested. Auto distortion control, currently not interested. Maybe if I had some more technical applications. Color space sRGB. Active D-lighting, not interested, so it's off. HDR is off. Vignette control, normal. Long exposure, noise reduction, I currently have that off. I'd prefer to do that in software if necessary. High ISO noise reduction, I just leave it at normal. ISO sensitivity settings. Now my personal choice is to use the ISO automatic functions. Set it at a 6400, maximum sensitivity, minimum shutter speed of 1/60th. Now you'll decide how low you want to go with the shutter speed and how high you're happy with the sensitivity. The only time I turn that off is when I'm using flash. Remote control mode, quick response remote. I don't use a remote control. Multiple exposure, not interested at the moment. Interval timer shooting is off because I barely do that. Time-lapse photography, again with this camera, I barely do that. Movie settings, well, I've fiddled around with it and I've settled at 24 frames per second on a 1080p. I have tried the higher ones too. I don't really care about the lower ones. Of course, movie quality high. Microphone, currently got it set to a manual of 6. That's after playing around with my lav mic plugged in. And destination to the first slot. Custom setting menu, autofocus. I always have it on the AFC priority selection on focus. AFS priority selection on focus. Focus tracking with lock on, normal. AF point illumination auto. Doesn't need to be on all the time, just when it needs to be. Focus point wraparound wrap, so that as I'm selecting the focus points, it will keep going round and round, so I don't have to go all the way back to the other side. Number of focus points, 39, because I want the most possible. I was a little bit disappointed with this D600, to be honest. It didn't quite have as many focus points as I would have liked, so I try and use the maximum. Built-in AF assist illuminator currently off, especially if I'm in a discrete shooting mode. I don't want anybody to have the idea I'm shooting at them without the need. So the AF assist illuminator, when that light comes on, that's one more thing that people can notice. ISO sensitivity step value, I keep that at a third. EV steps at a third. Easy exposure compensation off. Center weighted area 12, so it's relatively low. I don't mess with fine tuning the optimal exposure. Shutter release button AL off. Standby timer 6 seconds. Self timer currently don't have set, but it would be 2 seconds depending on what I'm shooting. Monitor off delay. Playback 10 seconds. Menus 20. Information display 10 seconds. Image review 4 seconds. Live view 10 minutes. We're now into the timers, the AE lock section. Remote on duration 1 minute. Beep off, so the pitch is irrelevant really. I don't want any sounds emitting while I'm shooting that don't need to be. It's the same with my mobile phones. I don't like that going beep, 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 beep every time I'm texting somebody. Viewfinder grid display, I leave that on. ISO display and adjustments. Show frame count. Screen tips, no thank you. CR mode shooting speed. Put it to the top one. I don't use it that often, to be honest, but I want it to be at the top. Maximum continue release, again 100. File number sequence on. Information display auto. LCD illumination on top, so that's off. To be honest, I don't shoot in the dark that often to need it. If I do need it, I just flick the on off button to turn it on. Exposure delay off. Flash warning on. Battery type is set there, although currently I don't have the MBD14, so that's irrelevant to me really, as is that. Flash sync speed, I want it at the highest possible. Flash shutter speed, I'm happy at 1/30th. Get a bit more ambient light in. Well, obviously I would meter it and measure it, but that's just where I set that. Now I want the flash on the top to operate as a commander. I'm not interested in that flash emitting any light that's going to affect my subject, but I do want it to control my other flashes. The CLS system is excellent. Exposure compensation for flash, entire frame. Tend to not use that. Modeling flash, tend to not use that. Auto bracketing set, AE and flash. Brackets in order, tend to ignore that. OK button to get me back to the center focus point. I do like that. Just a little bit quicker. Sign function button. I've got the virtual horizon there. Preview button, so I can flick straight into spot metering. So I'm shooting away, but I decide I want to use spot metering. All I have to do is just move one finger slightly, press the button, and I'm in spot metering mode. I've got AF on. Custom dials set up that way. Not really a big deal to me. I'm happy with them that way. Release button to use dial, no. Slot empty release lock enabled. Reverse indicators, assign MBD14. Again, I don't have one, but I've put it to AF on. If I did, assign AL, auto exposure lock, autofocus lock button. So I've got that to lock both of those. Assign the shutter button, take photos, record movies. Well, as a 99% of the time use this camera for photos, that's obviously going to be on that. Format memory card, this is where I always format. Nice and simple. And remember to do it with both slots. Always format in camera. Can save the user settings there, reset there. Monitor brightness I leave on 0. I've always loved the battery on this camera, so I don't worry too much about the brightness, but I just want it at a standard. Image sensor, clean. I have it clean at shutdown because I don't want it to slow me down when I want to shoot. Lock up mirror for cleaning. Image dust off reference photo. HDMI. Auto device control. Flicker reduction auto. Time zone and date, well, that's fairly obvious depending where you are. You can plug this into software, plug it into your computer and let it do it over the internet. That's a lot easier really, but I do tend to go into that quite a bit out in the field if I need to. Language, let me show you the options you've got there in case you've come for that. Flick through, get back to English, there we go. Image comment on. So I've got a comment in there, which is my email address. Again, auto image rotation, not interested in that at all. Battery info, that's handy to know. I've had this absolutely ages and the battery is still showing as new. Fantastic. Copyright information on, so you can input your business name, your artist name, whatever you want in there. GPS, don't use virtual horizon, don't use it too often, but I got it set to a function button. Non-CPU data lens, I do tend to use these when I mess about with the older lenses, so I've got that in there. You have to run in, swap it round, and you've got a number of options you can set to. So I've got 100 2.8 in there, which I've got in another video, and a 200 f4, which is actually a M42 lens. I forget now which brand, but that's what that's set for. I've never needed to fine tune the autofocus, and my firmware is as such. Might have a look on Nikon and see if there's been any updates actually. Retouch menu, I never ever touch. So I'm afraid if you've come to see something about that, I apologise. I believe you should do all your retouch and all your editing in the computer, shoot in RAW, get the best file possible, put it in the computer. If you feel the file size is too big, well, to be honest now, memory is so much cheaper, that shouldn't be an excuse. If you think it's a lot harder to edit, again, just try it a few times and you'll get into it, no problem. Many people I know have a lot of success with Lightroom. I use Photoshop, and really it's just the way forward for me. Plus you've got more latitude, more chance of getting that image. If you've had something go slightly wrong in the exposure, you've got a great chance of pulling it back compared to the JPEG where you're limited. So that's worth thinking about. Don't touch this retouch menu if you care about your images, and you can add items in here. My info screen here, and you can see a few more bits and pieces there. My flash sync at slow rear, again you can see the movie mode there, the noise reduction setting there, the vignetting there, the preview button which will take me to spot metering, the function button which will take me to virtual horizon, the AF on for the back button because I use back button focusing, the remote quick access there, noise reduction off there, and the backup to the second slot right there. Up here it reminds you that there's a copyright comment in there. Of course it shows you your aperture at the top, your shutter speed, shows you the exposure compensator, the focus point that you're currently using. So that's how I set up my Nikon D600. It's extremely simple. I use back button focusing, I use RAW, I keep the exposure compensation to the thirds, I use auto ISO to the degrees that I'm happy with, unless I'm using the flash. If I go into movie mode, I use one of the top HD modes, one of the highest quality modes, because there's no point shooting lower than that. And that's always use the fastest cards possible and have a play with what works best for you. Remember, retouch menu is really unnecessary if you ask me. Obviously, some people like it, which is why Nikon probably chose to include it. Thanks for watching.